Welcome back to AP US History. This is Chapter 24. We're going to continue talking about FDR and his New Deal. He will take office in 1933. During his campaign in 1932, he says to America that there is hope and that he has a plan to get us out of the worst economic slump America had ever experienced. This New Deal, there will be two parts to it. It'll last from 1932 to 1938. A new spirit comes in with Franklin Roosevelt. He came from a wealthy family. He was an undersecretary to the Navy during World War I. In 1921, he was confined to a wheelchair because he was stricken with polio. Most people believed that his career was over. But through rehabilitation and leg braces and therapy and a sympathetic press that never really shows him as a cripple. He was going to be elected as governor in 1928 and again in 1930, and he developed programs to help the unemployed and farmers. Many believed that he was a traitor to his class by the rich. They dubbed him a traitor. Certainly he is he believes in helping people directly. He certainly was the man of the hour. He certainly had critics, and he certainly was not a perfect man, but he gave America a vision, and we needed somebody to do that. He did put bread on the table, and he kept hungry children from starving. Hoover is amazed that he has been defeated by this upstart. I pledge myself to a New Deal, and so this is where this idea comes from. He promised a balanced budget, which he never delivered on. In fact, it will increase tenfold under his watch. He did promise aid to the unemployment, and he will deliver on that. He repeals the prohibition of alcohol because he believes that will help the economy. And so direct aid to individuals is forthcoming. Hoover, Republican, stay the course, believe that higher tariffs were going to protect American industry, maintain the gold standard, which Roosevelt will take us off of. He reaffirmed the faith in free enterprise and individual initiative, believed that the American economy would correct itself. But people are not drinking the Kool-Aid. They don't believe him, and so they're going to turn to somebody else who has what he says a New Deal. Hoover becomes a lame duck as president, and the economy comes to a halt, and he virtually does nothing. He leaves it to FDR to solve the problems. I don't know that he was a terrible president. He certainly was a moral man. He just wasn't up to the challenge. You can see in this election in 1932, the red states all going to Roosevelt. The New Deal, he believes that what he needs to do is surround himself with a lot of bright people and call on the experts and have an inner circle or a brain trust so they can come up with some ideas. Does he have a New Deal? Not really. It's on-the-job training, and we'll try anything to try to get the economy on its feet. Frances Perkins is going to be the first Secretary of Labor. She was a strong advocate for unions and the workers and safety in New York. And she's going to take that philosophy to the White House. This is a significant move for women in America. This is the first time that a woman has been elevated to the cabinet status. Harold Ickes was the Secretary of Treasury or Interior, and he was also the head of the WPA, the Works Progress Administration. Gave FDR a lot of ideas as to how to get the economy moving. Harry Hopkins was head of FERMA, Federal Emergency Relief Administration, and also the WPA, and these folks were in the business of providing direct aid to individual welfare payments. The first 100 days is called. Didn't have a plan, but people were willing to try anything because he said he had a plan. A lot of the programs overlapped, Some of them are contradicted each other. Some are going to be declared unconstitutional later by the Supreme Court. But FDR has what he calls fireside chats, and he's going to use the medium of radio because most Americans did have a radio in their house. And he's going to tell them that he's going to seek practical solutions to practical problems, and he's going to get America back to work, and that we're not to fear, that he's going to create some jobs, and people are going to have some bread on the table. The 3 R's, first of all, relief, that is, keep people from starving. Recovery, try to create some programs to get the economy on its feet. And reform, and that is, make sure that it doesn't happen again. This is a picture of the fireside chats. He was always said, a lot of photo ops were him sitting behind a desk. He rarely stood because he had to wear leg braces and had to be supported. His famous quote, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." Well, the short-range goals, this was the first 2 years. Get people back to work, get some food on the table. Keep people from starving. The long-term goals, permanent recovery, a reform of current abuses that caused the Great Depression. Certainly he is a progressive. He's going to look to unemployment insurance, old age insurance, that is Social Security, minimum wage, increase that, conservation and restrictions on child labor, all the things that were pretty much sought from 1900 to 1920 by Teddy Roosevelt, Taft, and Wilson. Congress was eager to help. The Republicans went right along with him. They gave FDR what they called a blank check, that is, the power to do what he thought was best. One of the first things that he will tackle is the banking industry. Over 5,000 banks failed in 1933, bringing the total to over almost 11,000 banks from the beginning of the Great Depression. Banks in 38 states were closed by the state government, a remainder open for limited operations. FDR is going to call for a bank holiday. This is from March 6th to 10th, and he's going to send bank examiners out to see whether banks are solvent and should continue to operate. He's going to consolidate banks, and he's going to close them down. He took the nation off the gold standard so he could print more paper money, so the money is not backed by anything except the good faith of the government. So you couldn't go down and redeem your dollars for gold. As far as people's life savings during the Great Depression, a lot of them lost it. He's going to try to come up with a solution to fix that. Here shows a pyramid of unequal wealth distribution in America, which caused part of the problems during the Great Depression. He passes the Emergency Bank Relief Act of 1933 that gives the power of the president to open sound banks after 10 days to merge and liquidate unsound ones. Provided additional funds for banks from the Federal Reserve. You couldn't hoard gold during this time. In fact, it's going to be illegal to own gold eventually, and you're going to have to sell it to the government. The Glass-Steagall Banking Reform Act was formed, which said that banks, ordinary depositor banks, could not invest in the stock market. He comes up with what he calls the FDIC, Federal Depository Insurance Corporation, that will insure your money up to $5,000. Today, this same organization insures your deposits up to $250,000. So he separates commercial banks from depositor banks. The Security and Exchange Commission was put together to protect citizens from fraud and stock manipulation. The SEC. Banking Act in 1935 gave the Federal Reserve Board power to control and regulate regional banks. Relief for unemployed. One of the things that he puts together for young men is what he calls a Civilian Conservation Corps. Young men would go out and plant trees, build dams, build trails. Many of those are still in existence today in the West. This provided work for nearly 3 million young men who were given uniforms. They were treated as kind of a quasi-military operation. Men would work, young men, and they would send part of their wages home to feed the families. And they're going to do a lot of good in terms of flood control, building national parks, and replanting trees. And you weren't mandated to send money home, but a lot of these young men sent home money to their parents because they were being fed and clothed by the federal government. The Federal Emergency Relief Administration, FERMA, is going to be passed. And this is an organization that actually hands out money, welfare payments, to individuals who are unemployed. It was called being on the dole, dole payments. So if you didn't have a job, you were going to get some money in your pocket. Many of the jobs that they created under the Federal Emergency Relief Administration were make work tasks just to put some money in people's pocket. The Public Works Administration was passed, and this was to pump $4 billion into local and state governments to provide jobs for building bridges, schools, airports, roads, etc. Here shows the life in the CCC, the Civil Conservation Corps. This was a camp located in Virginia. Here's recruits taking an oath, saying that they will do their best to serve their country. Young men here given a chance to work. They started with a bugler sounding the day. It was run much like the Army. And of course there was always KP duty, that is preparing food and for the men. The Works Progress Administration, WPA, again another social engineered program to put people to work. Employed nearly 9 million people on public work projects, roads, airports, schools, bridges, similar to the Works Progress Administration. Eventually employed 40% of the nation's workers at a cost of almost $12 billion, a huge amount for those days. And it employed every sort of person, from artists, musicians to college students, bookbinders, you name it. They created a job so people could get some money in their pockets. As far as relief for farmers were concerned, the Agricultural Adjustment Act was passed in 1933 to help improve the prices for farms. You were actually given money not to grow crops, which seemed like a novel idea, especially when millions are going hungry during this time. But they figured that this was a way to help the farmers. Many criticized the program because they killed animals that could have been served as meat on the table and also food on the table for the hungry. Forging ahead, the WPA, and we'll stop there and we'll pick this up next.